Tanta, wapastem tsikasun. Hello, my name's Whitehorse, and today we're out picking medicines today. And today we're picking what we call in my grandmother's tongue waskatamo. So in Cree we call it waskatamo, but in English it's called giant lily pad root. And with the giant lily pad, very easy to distinguish. Very hard to find, but very easy to identify when you do find it, because it's exactly what the name says in English, giant lily pad. So the giant lily pads, you can see them on the water here. They float up, and the long stalk, sometimes the stalks could be up to 5 or 6 feet long, and the root is very near the bottom of the water that it grows in. But these root stalks grow all the way up and they float on the top. And during the midsummer, they have a little flower that grows up, and the flower it starts out yellow, then the flower turns white. But that's usually not when we pick them. We pick them now. Right now it's early September. So the plant has already finished flowering. It's spread its seeds, and we're going to let it spread its seeds and wait till after it's done that, so we know that the plant is going to continue to grow. And we always make sure, especially when we're picking medicines, and we only pick what we need when we're picking medicines. But with waskatamo, it's really hard to pick, because like I said, sometimes the roots, the stems on it, sometimes they can grow up to 5 or 6 feet deep, and that's how deep they are in the water. So you got to come up with ways to try and get at those roots in the bottom, because it's the root that we want, because that's where my chapans, my nochum, my mosum, that's where they pick that medicine, to get medicine to help heal them when they're sick. But that's why we'd pick this. Now with waskatamo, it is slightly edible, but it's really bitter, so it's not something that you could probably survive on it if you have to, but you'd have to cook it over and over. Like I think with my kokum, she said you'd have to cook it like maybe four times and keep changing the water just to get it so it's not so bitter, so that you can eat it. And even then you don't eat so much because it'll give you a sore stomach. But mostly my chapans and kokum and musum, they didn't pick it to eat it. They picked it for medicine. So like I said, it's way too much work to pick it for eating. But if you had to, I guess you could survive off of it. But only if you had to, because it is kind of super bitter, and if you eat too much, it does get you sick. So it's really not good to use as a plant you want to eat. But for medicine, it's a really strong medicine. So like I said, the lily pad is a really big lily pad, not the small lily pads that you see growing on the pond. Those ones, you pull them up and you just get a little root clump with it. With waskatamo, when you find the giant lily pad, you really got to dig deep in the water, and when you do finally get the root to come up, it is really big. So you'll see here, this is the root, waskatamo root, and right now it's huge, and it took us a lot of work. So for us, we didn't bring any special tools, so what I used was just a stick, and then we dug way down and kind of felt along to where the root was. And even after we felt where the root was, it took a lot of work to try and break that root and then get that root stock up. But once we did, after a lot of work, this is what we get. Now once you do get it like this, the only thing we want is this big root part. So with all of these smaller parts, we just break it off. Because right now this is so full of water, that's why it's so huge. But you'd be amazed at how it looks once it dries, because once it dries, It's gonna go to the size maybe a little bigger than my thumb once all the water is out of it and it dries up. That's how much water is in here. Because with Wascutamo, it's a water plant. So of course it grows in the water. So we just break off all these root sides on it, and this is what we want. So you see it looks sort of like a pineapple, where you can see where all of the previous lily pads had grown out of there over the years, and they grow out of where it looks like a pineapple, and the lily pad grows up and sticks out of the water. So like I said, really hard to pick it because it grows deep in the water. Some people in the warmer weather, or where it grows where it's not so deep, I've seen them go into the water and dig around for the roots. For this one, this was about 6 feet deep, so we had a really hard time trying to get this root out, just feeling around with the stick that we have. But once we did, we managed to break it off and pull it up. So this is what we're looking for. This is what we call Wascutamo. Now with Wascutamo, I'll just go over the common uses for it, because Wascutamo is considered to have it's a painkiller. Analgesic is what they call it, and what it does is it'll soothe pain. So if I had an infection or something outside my body, I would use this root, or I'd dry it up, then I'd put it into sort of powder, and then I just wet it with water and put it like a salve wherever I had pain, and it soothes that. It kind of takes the pain away. But it's also most commonly used for its antibiotic strength, because it does have antibiotic properties, meaning it does act like an antibiotic, but mainly for outside the skin. Now I'm not going to talk about how it's used inside, because you have to be very careful with medicines like this, and we don't like to just tell anybody how we make the roots for when we drink it, because it's very dangerous. But for outside the skin, we can tell people how we'd use them for that. So with Wascutamo, if I had a really bad infection, I could use, again, dry it up, make the powder, and use a little bit of water, and put this dried powdered Wascutamo onto one of my sores. They used to use it for really bad infections because, like I said, it's an antibiotic, meaning it'll take away infection. It's also an anti-inflammatory. The only use I'll tell you about where you'd use it not outside your body is, it was commonly used for people who had like a throat infection or a mouth infection, and all you do is you gargle with the water. Same thing, you make the powder, you put some in the water, and you gargle with it. You don't drink it, you gargle with it. And it used to take away stuff like sores in the mouth, or if you had, say, a throat infection like strep throat, that antibiotic would get in there and take that infection away, because something like strep throat is an infection inside. But you don't want to drink it unless you absolutely know what you're doing, and it's somebody who knows how to use the medicines. So like I said, we're going to take this, we'll let it completely dry, but before we dry it, there's one more step to go through, and I'll show you that in the next video of how we cut it and let it dry. But this is the kind of area where you'd find Wascutamo, but remember, you got to look for the giant lily pad. It's not the smaller ones. It's a giant lily pad, and you got to make sure that it's the right one. And you'll know right away if you pick any other lily pad. This is the only, Wascutamo is the only lily pad that has this type of root. The other ones just have clumps of roots and they just sort of float along. So that is how Wascutamo looks in the bush, and that's how we pick it. sa maaga.